snow whispered against the courtyards of Winterfell, each flake a secret carried from the gray-green wilds. The first chill of true winter tasted of rust and pine on the wind, sliding between tower stones to coil in the smithy's heart. There, heat roared defiance, bellows thumping, forge yawning orange, sparks pirouetting like fireborn sprites before being swallowed by shadows. Two figures labored within that cavern of iron music. Tobho Mott, master smith summoned from King's Landing at terrible expense, and the giant to whom his craft now bound him. Hodor, taller than even the hound, broad as a stable door, head bowed beneath low lintels, stood shirtless while Tobho measured the raw stump where a deerwolf had stolen half an arm during the flight from Craster's Keep. The wound had healed puckered and ragged, but the loss had not dimmed the gentle light inside his dark eyes. He watched the older man's careful work with trusting stillness. Torchia glow limned the vastness of his shoulders. Steam rose where snowmelt kissed his skin. "Hodor," he rumbled, as though answering a question only he could hear. "Yes, yes. Steady now," Mott muttered. His voice bore the irritation of genius harnessed to another's will. Lord Eddard's ghost, some said, had walked from deeper crypts to commission this miracle, a prosthesis of Valyrian steel. Light yet unbreakable, sharp enough to sever chainmail seams. It was madness to waste such rare metal. Rumored scavenged from fallen House Celtigar, on a stable boy, yet none dared refuse when the direwolves themselves guarded the lad's sleep. Mott traced glyphs of weight upon charcoal parchment. Beside him, a brazier held what most armorsmiths would never see in a dozen lives. Slender ingots, rippling dusk black, oily with undertones of cobalt and violet. The secret folds within the steel remembered centuries of dragon fire. Even in repose, they seemed to breathe. Hodor shifted. Chains clinked from ceiling hooks. They tethered the new limb's skeletal frame. An intricate cage of articulating rings, each stamped with sigils for strength. Though ungainly now, when finished it would fuse art and terror. A gauntlet that could crush tempered blades, fingers ending in half-moons, honed to razor hearts. Yet the knuckles were embossed with weirwood leaves, gentle, as if Bran had whispered to the smith to temper war with mercy. Outside, Bran Stark watched through the doorway, his chair's oak wheels sunk deep in straw. Summer, the gray direwolf, lay across the threshold, massive head on paws, amber gaze fixed on every spark that leapt from the anvil. Bran's thoughts scudded elsewhere. To weirwood dreams, to wings he wore in Ravencraft, to corridors of time where Hodor's voice was not a single word bound by fate. He blinked, and the iron smell jolted him back. "How long?" Bran asked. Mott answered without looking up. "Until moonrise for the poor. Another fortnight for the joints to cool proper. Faster and the steel rebels. You'd not wish rebellion on your friend's flesh." Bran nodded. Patience was a castle's mortar. Dawn stretched pale over the godswood when they strapped the cooled framework to Hodor's stump. Maester Walken murmured over leather bindings, his chain rustling with sigils old as the citadel. He anointed metal and flesh alike with ice mint salve that steamed against the articulated knuckles. Hodor winced not once. His eyes tracked ravens drifting beyond broken battlements, as though each black wing carried a memory he dared not speak. "Hodor," he breathed, softer than snowlight. Bran sat opposite, hand resting upon the direwolf's flank. "You'll learn the motion soon. Close, now open. Like this." He flexed his own fingers. The prosthesis echoed the gesture, whirring with tiny steel cables thin as spider silk. A hush fell. Stable hands, guards, even Lady Sansa, leaning from a distant walkway, froze to witness the moment. Valyrian steel kissed winter air, singing a note forged when the freehold still blotted skies with dragons. Hodor closed his new hand around Bran's palm. Carefully, delicately, the way one might cradle a hatchling chick. Tears flecked Bran's lashes. The boy who would be Greenseer felt more than strength in that grip. He felt choice, returning to a life too often cornered by prophecy. Across the yard, Arya Stark practiced water dancer forms, needle-slicing patterns invisible to all but her. She paused mid-lunge, a grin flickering. About time someone else had a magic sword, she whispered, though no one was near to hear. Days bled into nights beneath aurora-vined skies. Hodor trained with Ser Brienne in the shadow of the looming wall of Winterfell's inner keep. Snow turned trampled earth to sludge about their boots. Each dawn, firelight from the smithy glimmered across his new arm's dark filigree. He began with simple motions. Lift a buckler, swing a blunt practice mace affixed to the wrist mount. At first, momentum threatened to wrench shoulder from socket, yet he persevered, guided by Brienne's patient cadence. Balance is not strength alone, she said, parrying his sweeping strike that howled through air. Anchor from the hips, not the heart. Her own blade rang, parry meeting metal claws that sparked. She fought as though sculpting him, blows chiseling stance, footwork, breath. Tormund Giantsbane watched from ramparts, beard clotted with frost. Big lad swings like a windmill, he chortled. Soon he'll harvest foes instead of grain. Evenings, Hodor rested in the great hall beside roaring hearths, muscles trembling from exertion. Bran worked the gears of his chair closer, offering maps of the castle so they could plan vantage points. Their whispered counsels drew curious eyes. Podrick Payne setting fresh cups of hot pine needle tea. Davos Seaworth, candles glinting off finger bones about his neck, nodding approval. They plotted corridors for retreat, courtyards for defense, because word had come on icy wings. The Night King marched south with dead 10,000 strong. 3 days before the long night's arrival, a horn wailed from the watchtower. Sentries glimpsed pale forms on the northern ridge. Skeletons whiter than moonlit ash, their empty sockets shimmering cerulean. A hush devoured Winterfell's courtyards, yet within that silence hearts beat louder, harder. Hodor stood at the battlement's edge, prosthetic fingers drumming stone in restless tattoo. Bran rolled up beside him, cloak snapping like a broken raven's wing. "They'll breach at dawn," Bran said. Hodor turned, hair white with frost, lips shaping the single word that was also his name. Yet this time it sounded like a vow. Night fell thick as clotting blood. Fires lined the ditches ringing Winterfell. Beyond them, an ocean of the dead waited, each skull reflecting orange halos. Snowflakes hissed as they melted upon burning pitch, rising as steam that drifted low across the ramparts. Ghosts before the ghosts attacked. In the courtyard, Hodor knelt while Gendry Baratheon tightened bolts along the prosthesis. Arya jogged past, face masked in soot, hand brushing his massive shoulder, an unspoken blessing. Ghost. Jon Snow's great direwolf paused to sniff the Valyrian steel, then loped onward into dark. Drums beat. Gates shuddered as the first whites hurled themselves upon wooden spikes. A high, keening cry ruptured the sky. Viserion blue flamed and riderless, arcing above. The earth answered with fear. Yet amid that chorus of terror, Hodor rose, new arm flashing cobalt, as forge marks caught torch glare. He hefted the mace fused to his wrist, a head shaped like a snarling wolf, edges honed to star points. "Hodor," he growled, and for the first time his voice seemed to carry many syllables, an echo of a lost self returning with winter's wrath. Bran, safe in the godswood, yet seeing through Raven's 1,000 eyes, felt warmth bloom in his chest despite the cold. The threads of fate twisted like roots. Somewhere a door long stuck between past and present nudged wider. When the gates finally snapped, the dead came as a river come roaring from broken ice, toppling ramparts of bone and iron. Hodor met them beneath burning banners, prosthetic arms scything through skull and sinew. Valyrian steel singing in a pitch only the doomed could hear. Each blow crushed a dozen. Each swing sparked winds that flung shards of frozen flesh skyward. He fought beside Brienne, their movements uncanny mirror. Her Oathkeeper blade dancing sunfire gold, his wolf-headed mace a night-black comet. Whites clambered over the fallen snarling jaws seeking purchase. One leapt upon Hodor's back, nails scratching uselessly at the steel torso plate he wore. He reached back, clawed fingers of his new hand digging into frozen vertebrae, ripping the creature free to smash it against paving stones until only shards remained. Another rushed Brienne's blind side. Hodor shifted like a moving wall, intercepting mace-pulping bone. But for every corpse felled, 3 more surged forth, driven not by hunger, but command of the Night King, who drifted above battlefield winds upon Valyrian's skeletal frame, sapphire gaze unblinking. Soon the yard lay slick with blackened ichor mingled with slush. Hodor's breaths became storm clouds. The prosthetic whirred, gears straining under ceaseless carnage, yet still it moved with savage grace. Gendry's design had channeled shock along hidden springs. Tobhomat's folded magic granted edges eternal. "Hodor," Arya called, voice slicing din. She pointed. Sansa pressed against masonry, cornered by 4 skeletal spearmen. Without pause, Hodor barreled through a knot of the dead, scattering bodies like straw. He swept the mace in a wide crescent. Wood and bone shattered. The last white spear slid across his chest plate, scoring sparks. He seized the haft in living hand, snapped it, then crushed the monster's throat. Sansa stared up wide-eyed, face luminescent beneath aurora fires. She touched his steel forearm, as though confirming the miracle was real. "Thank you." Words unheard amid chaos, yet felt. Above, ice began to fall. Not snow, but shards the size of raven feathers, razor-edged. They sliced through banners, bit into flesh. Somewhere a horn boomed twice. Retreat to inner walls. Hodor stepped between falling blades and friends alike, shielded by breath and metal. He herded wounded into covered archways, prosthetic raised overhead, deflecting glacial rain. Each strike rang like a hammer on cathedral bells, resounding courage into trembling hearts. As ramparts emptied, Hodor looked once to the godswood where Bran waited beneath the heart tree. Red leaves fluttering like torn skin. He felt a pull, an invisible tether. But his war was here, for now, in the yard slick with snowmelt and blood. He turned back toward cratered gates, steam rising from his shoulders, mace head cracked but unbowed. The Night King landed upon splintered timbers, cloak billowing like midnight smoke. Dead eyes met living giant's dark gaze. Between them stretched silence, brittle as frozen glass. Hodor exhaled a single plume. "Hod." The second syllable caught, reshaped by something half-remembered. "Hold." His fist tightened. Gearwork thrummed. The 2 armies stilled, as though fate itself inhaled. And in that hush, Winterfell stones seemed to whisper histories yet unwritten. 8-0 characters delivered. "Prompt me to continue and I will supply the next installment immediately." Bensum Kau. All I. D. Ah. Hodor braced, snow hissing across the polished plates of his arm as the Night King advanced one measured step. Wind scoured the yard, banners lashed in torn ribbons. The dead shifted restlessly behind their lord, a slow rustle like dry reeds bending under ice. The giant's breath plumed once, twice. Somewhere within the forge-darkened steel of his new limb, gears clicked, ready. Valyrian's ruinous body crouched behind its master, cracked ribs glowing blue from coils of frost fire churning inside. Each exhalation sent jets of ghost flame skirling round splintered beams. Smoke curled over the battlements, masking the stars. A horse's skull. Frozen eyes lit sapphire, clattered down a stairwell, and burst beneath the dragon's talon. No one moved, even the living forgot to breathe. The Night King lifted his spear of crystalline ice, its surface veined like ancient glass, and pointed it toward Hodor. The motion was not a threat, but an invitation. As though he recognized, in the great stable boy, some opposite reflection of his own relentless purpose. Their gazes, dark and cerulean, locked. Then the world flew apart. The Night King darted, impossibly quick for a creature of so many winters, and the spear reversed, sweeping sideways in a scything arc, meant to sever metal and flesh alike. Hodor pivoted his hips, just as Brienne's drilling had taught him, letting momentum carry the blow past his midline. The crystalline blades sang against stone, showering sparks that froze before they fell. With the same motion, Hodor's living hand found the haft, muscles rippling beneath patchwork mail. He wrenched. The Night King did not release. Instead, he stepped into the pull, closing inside Hodor's reach. Thin blue lips curled. A palm of necrotic ice snapped forward, fingers aiming to pierce the giant's heart. But the Valyrian prosthesis was already moving. Wolf-headed mace swinging upward from low guard, steel plates sliding with flawless choreography. The weapon crashed into the undead monarch's forearm, shattering crystal and bone in a spray of powder-fine shards. Frost smoke bellowed from the Night King's mouth. Soundless outrage forged into storm. Hodor felt the impact reverberate through shoulder and spine, but he held ground, boots gouging grooves through slush. The spear rattled loose. He flung it aside, where it shattered upon the courtyard's frozen flagstones. Wights howled as their master reeled back, skeletal fingers reknitting, fractures sealing in eddies of cold flame. The mace was dented, but Tobho Mott's work held. Edges still gleamed with oily midnight. Above them, ravens circled in dizzying spirals. Inside each black eye, Bran rode the wind. He saw everything. The uneven footing, the fractures racing through stone buttresses, the dragon poised to unleash death again. He whispered to the wind, to league-distant weirwoods, to memories of men who yet lingered in bark and sap. Branches quivered, though no breeze reached them. Across the yard, Arya glimpsed the duel through a veil of smoke. She pivoted upon a heel slick with blood, scanning for an opening. Needle quivered in her grasp, eager. Her breath came steady. She counted heartbeats. There, Valyrian's flank exposed while it coiled for another breath of frost fire. She ran. Ghost blurred at her side, white fur streaked crimson where razor ice had cut. Together they sprinted across corpses and broken shields. The dragon pivoted, nostrils glowing cobalt. Its jaws opened. Hodor thrust the prosthesis forward, the flattened back edge catching Valyrian broad across the snout. For one heartbeat, frosted bone met indestructible steel. The blue furnace in the dragon's throat hiccuped, flame swallowing itself. Frozen ichor splattered the ground. Arya dove beneath the outstretched wing, rolled, emerged at the beast's flank, the cat's paw dagger in hand. She carved a single smooth line along a rent in ribbone, burying dragonglass to the hilt. Blue fire vented from the wound in a banshee shriek. Valyrian thrashed, tail swept, hurling Arya skyward. She bounced from a parapet, rolled into a drift. Wind knocked free, but dagger still clenched. The Night King flashed across intervening space, eyes fixed on the dagger's ebon hilt. Hodor intercepted, body planting like a rooted oak. The two forces collided. Stone cracked. Hodor's back slammed against the inner gate. Snow erupted in a halo around them, momentarily blind. He felt ribs creak, but the old stable boy's strength, nurtured in haylofts and wagon yards, refused to yield. He answered with a headbutt. The crown of his skull met the Night King's brow in a dull, sickening crunch. A thin spiderweb of fractures spread across that inhuman face, instantly refreezing. But the damage was done. A chip the size of a fingernail fell away, revealing dusky blue shadow beneath. The Night King's gaze narrowed to slits. Hodor growled, the word lost to storm, and drove forward, shoulder in the undead's chest. He seized armor of frost carapace with living hand, prosthetic claws digging for purchase at the neck seam. Gears strained, cables thrummed, sparks of sorcerous friction danced. He lifted the Night King from the ground. For an instant, the courtyard beheld a miracle. Doom personified, feet dangling over shattered tiles, held aloft by a gentle giant whose life had been one long chain of obedience. Hodor's face contorted, rage, sorrow, determination mingling like molten iron. The blue within the Night King flared, ice spread along the prosthetic, racing up elbow and shoulder in jagged rhyme. Bran saw it and whispered through 1,000 wings. A murder of Raven's dove, raking at the Night King's frigid visage. Talons snapped against crystal flesh. Annoyance only. Yet each cut broke Bran's skin where he sat unmoving beneath the heart tree. Sap blood dripped onto roots, feeding memory to what lay beneath. The Night King's fingers splayed, and from the air coalesced a blade of purest darkness. Deeper than midnight, edges sparkling with trapped starlight. He stabbed. The sword passed beneath Hodor's raised arm, sliding between rings of mail at the side, biting into flesh. pain burst crimson behind Hodor's eyes. He roared, sound shaking ramparts, and flung the corpse monarch bodily across the courtyard. The Night King tumbled, ice panzer shattering, rolled and rose without loss of grace. White surged to shield him, a tide of bone. They streamed toward Hodor in a ragged crescent. Scores, then hundreds. A mountain alive with rot. Brienne returned then. Helm gone, blonde hair wet against cheek. Her sword licked firelight, Oathkeeper humming. Beside her Podrick, bay speckled with ash, rallied a line of pikemen. Gendry hefted a warhammer heavy enough for Robert in his prime. Tormund bellowed something half-jape, half-war cry. The living charged, splitting the night. Spears clashed, blades rang. Flesh tore. Everywhere blue eyes winked out like dying candles as dragonglass found heart. But the dead were endless. Hodor pressed a palm to his bleeding side. Warmth-soaked glove and sleeve. He swayed. Above, Valyrian gathered itself, wings lifting the monstrous skeleton aloft, even as holes vented blue flame in erratic jets. Bran willed ravens to harry its eyes, but feathers crisped in the furnace heat. Sansa and a clutch of archers loosed fire arrows from the towers. The shafts hissed through sleet. Some found purchase between ribs, igniting bursts of ghostly fire, yet still the dragon soared, climbing into a bank of stormed clouds luminous with aurora. Torchlight flickered, shadows lengthened, the world shrank to each heartbeat. Hodor inhaled frost, feeling blood pulse with every breath. The prosthetic's joints protested, ice seeping into gear housings. He flexed. The steel fingers cracked loose in glittering shards. Still he could move. He turned toward Arya, who stood again, shoulders curled around a broken rib, but dagger ready. Bran's voice drifted across minds, not ears. Protect the weirwood. They understood. Through a breach in the arch, they saw White scaling inner walls toward the godswood. Bran's wheelchair sat abandoned, snow gathering upon seat, but they felt him there, beyond, his consciousness the unseen loom on which battle thread was woven. If the Night King reached him, all ended. Arya sprinted first, weaving through combat like water around rocks, silent as a shadow. Hodor followed, steps slower but seismic, clearing bodies with sweeps of the mace that left none standing. His wound tore wider, crimson dripped into snow, steaming. Yet each pulse of pain sharpened resolve. They entered the broken cloister. Moonlight lanced through shattered panes, illuminating white weirwood bark ahead. The courtyard wall to east had crumbled beneath giant white assault. Hulking dead remnants of Mag the Mighty's kin forced through gap, their bodies sewn with chains and shards of ice. Blue eyes glowered from sockets half collapsed. One uprooted a stone pillar and hurled it, missing Arya by a handspan. Hodor barreled between them and the heart tree. The giant White swung a frost-bound fist. Hodor ducked, world shrinking to the echo of Brienne's lessons, and drove prosthetic claws upward into the creature's jaw. Metal teeth sheared through bone, splitting skull. He ripped free, then pivoted, mace hammering knee joints backward. The colossal body folded, slow as felled oak. From his left, another giant closed, dragging a ballista bolt as club. Arya somersaulted over a drifting tuft of snow, landing behind the new foe. She scaled its back like a squirrel, using bone ridges as ladder, reached the neck, plunged dragonglass between vertebrae. The creature's roar ended mid-thunder. It toppled sideways into the first, pulverizing both into fragments. Silence, save for distant battle roar and the hoot of an owl possessed by Bran. Against weirwood roots, the Night King appeared, striding from gloom as though birthed by shadow. His armor had reformed, seamless. The darkness-forged blade rested casually at hip. He raised an open palm, and the air grew heavy. The snow itself seemed to hesitate. Behind Hodor, lifeless bodies twitched, Whites he had slain moments prior. Ice-blue eyes flickered alight. They rose, forming a ring, skeletal fingers reaching for him. He realized the trap. The Night King needed only delay them until Hodor's strength failed, or Arya was overwhelmed. Bran sat still beneath the heart tree, a beacon, his fate balanced on edge. Hodor planted one foot forward, teeth gritted. He swung in a wide circle, prosthetic claws eviscerating 2 fresh whites, mace crushing a third. But numbers mounted faster than he slew. Fingers raked his calves, tore cloth, sought hamstrings. He stamped, splintering spines. Yet, there were always more. Arya darted through gaps, blade flick-flick. But for every corpse she downed, another stirred. The Night King stepped closer to Bran. Only a dozen paces now. He smiled. A brittle, frozen thing without warmth. Branches groaned under sudden rime. Red leaves blackened where his chill touched them. Hodor roared, voice echoing off cloister arches, and surged. He shoulder-smashed a pathway, blood spraying from open side wound. The world narrowed to that white-haired monarch, framed by heart tree roots. He lifted the mace overhead. At the same instant, the Night King thrust his sword downward toward Bran's chest. Time shattered like glass. Through Bran's ravens, the children of the forest remembered a language of sunlit ages. Through summer's golden eyes, Bran saw the hinge upon which the night turned. He reached with thought, not flesh, into the prosthesis his friend wielded. Into the folded Valyrian steel, each layer hammered when dragons yet ruled the world. He whispered the name by which old Valyria called the star metal. Zobravalia. The mace glowed. Runes, etched at forging, brightened, searing white. The steel claws, once only sharp, now burned with dawn fire. Thin tendrils of flame traced along cables. Into Hodor's flesh, pain and purity fused. He felt not burn but warmth, like the hearth he once guarded as stable boy. He swung. The mace had met the Night King's sword. For an instant, silence. Then an explosion of light. A scream of metal and ice. The crystal sword shattered into a million glittering motes. The blast flung Hodor back across cobbles, landing in kneel. But the Night King stumbled too. Fractures spidered across his torso, traveling toward heart. A pulsing sapphire shard visible in splintering cage. Arya did not hesitate. She vaulted off a toppled pillar, body twisting in midair. The cat's paw dagger changed hands as she fell. Left to right, clutched backhand. She drove point first toward the exposed shard. The Night King's hand shot up. But she dropped the dagger to her left. Caught it again. Momentum unstoppable. Her strike met flesh just as the Night King's fingers seized her throat. Dragon glass pierced the blue heart. Light exploded, whirlpooling outward, swallowing every white's eyes into darkness. The world inhaled and exhaled frostfire in a single thunderclap. When vision cleared, shards of the Night King's form lay scattered like broken mirrors, already melting away into plain water. Arya knelt coughing, throat bruised. Hodor staggered upright, hand pressed aside, the warmth of dawn fire fading in prosthesis. Across the battlefield, whites buckled, lifeless at last. Viserion plummeted from the sky, disintegrating to ash before it hit ground. Silence spread, heavy as a blanket, broken only by distant sob of wind. Bran opened eyes mortal once more. Snow settled upon his lashes. He smiled at friends gathered beneath the tree. Hodor sank onto a bench of roots, exhaustion crashing over him like surf. Blood still flowed, but slower now. He looked around, confusion surfacing, then calm. He lifted the Valyrian arm, flexed fingers slick with night's ruin. For the first time since old stable doors closed behind him, his lips split into a gentle smile. Hodor, he said, softly, contentedly, as though the single word now held multitudes. Friend, shield, victor, home. Lights dawned along Winterfell's walls. Survivors emerged, carrying torches that guttered against dawn's pale emergence. Sansa found Arya, folded her into trembling arms. Brienne pressed palm to Hodor's wound, Maester already running. Behind them, the heart tree's face wept sap-red tears that glinted gold beneath early sun. Its branches shed frost, leaves sighing as though relieved of ancient weight. Far beyond, ravens spiraled away to greet new morning, their shadows long on white snow. The dawn rose quietly, as though wary of disturbing so fragile a peace. But rise it did, painting clouds rose-silver, setting shards of fallen ice aflame with gentle light. In its glow, Valyrian steel gleamed, no longer cold homage to dragons, but tempered tool of hope. Hodor watched sunlight dance across the sculpted wolf's head of his mace. He felt the weight of it, no longer just metal but memories. Of Bran's laughter on spring days, of haylofts fragrant with summer, of voices chanting his one name with love. He closed steel fingers around the haft, not to fight, but to feel. Hodor, he whispered again, and strangers who had fought beside him now understood it not as a limitation but a benediction. The long night had ended. Winterfell endured, and in the stillness, carried on faint breeze, came the first birdsong of a hard-won dawn. Ein Shai. Smoke drifted in gentle ribbons above the battlements, the scent of pine tar pyres mingling with alderwood, and the distant tang of hot iron from Tobho Mott's forge. Dawn had crept higher, pushing indigo shadows into crenellations, gilding patches of trampled snow with pale gold. Winterfell breathed, in, the hush of wind through scorched arrow slits. Out, the faint stir of banners too weary to billow. Survivors moved like ghost lanterns between half-melted drifts, heads bowed beneath the weight of memory. Hodor lay on a makeshift pallet within the great hall, direwolf pelts thrown across his massive chest. The maester's poultice, pungent with resin and bear fat, darkened the bandage at his side. He dozed under the flicker of torches, steel fingers flexing reflexively whenever dream shadows passed behind his eyes. Beside him, Brienne kept silent vigil, sword across her knees, nodding to each who approached. The gift of privacy in a place where nothing remained private for long. Arya arrived wordless, snowboard in silence, until leather boots whispered across rush-strewn floor. She studied the sleeping giant a moment, then set something small by his hand. A polished hematite wolf carved in mid-leap. She retreated before Hodor stirred, but the steel claws closed gently, unconsciously, around the token. Outside, Bran guided his chair along the broken walkways. Gendry pushed from behind, pausing whenever wheels bumped masonry out of alignment. They passed stone masons measuring fissures and walls, wildlings stacking fresh quarried blocks, archers restringing longbows damaged by frost. Overall echoed the slow rhythm of rebuilding. Hammers resting briefly only so ravens could report the realm's wider tremors. King's Landing waits, Bran murmured. Cersei will not pause her schemes because our dawn was longer than hers. Gendry wiped soot from brow. Let her wait. Winterfell bleeds. She counts on that. They halted at the edge of the courtyard where Hodor's duel had carved furrows deep into flagstones. Bran stared at the cracks, each line a memory etched across stone. Ravens hopped between them, beaks pecking glimmers of melting ice. When the gods shift threads, Bran continued, chance becomes purpose. Hodor has been purpose in flesh. And you think he must ride south? Bran's gaze drifted skyward, following a column of gulls blown far inland by storms. I think all of us will. North, south, riverlands and vale. Because the last war did not end, it only changed shape. 3 nights later, Winterfell's hall glowed with feast fire. Not feasting for victory, grain stores were meager and ale thin, but for remembrance. Upon oaken trestles sat trenchers of barley stew, knuckles of salt pork, and the rare sweetness of winterberries soaked in honeyed wine. Flames snapped from hearth to rafters, chasing back chill that seeped through stone. Hodor stood near the dais, fresh linen tunic draping over linen-bound wound. The Valyrian arms shone dull black in torchlight, joints polished, wolf-head mace now detached and resting upright at his side like a sleeping dog. Sansa raised a carved wooden cup, voice carrying across hush. To those who held the gate, to those who kept the words, Winterfell is home when hope fell silent. To Hodor, shield of hearth and heart-tree. Murmurs swelled into applause, tankards thumping. Hodor's cheeks colored, he ducked head, hair brushing collar. When the cheering ebbed, he lifted his own cup, earthenware so tiny in his grasp it seemed a child's toy. Hodor, he said. The single syllable rippled across the hall, transformed by shared meaning. I hear you, I thank you, I stand with you. In that echo lay a covenant stronger than oaths forged at sword point. Afterward, he moved through clusters of men-at-arms, women who had mended shield straps, children wide-eyed at his towering kindness. He listened, not with words but with presence, letting grief pour like winter rivers that must thaw before spring. Now and then he extended the steel hand, palm up, so little ones could marvel at cold strength, tempered to gentleness. Their giggles rose like bells, scattering the lingering ghosts of battle. Deep, in the godswood, snowfall hushed beneath black needles. Bran waited beneath the heart tree, red leaves whispering in night breeze. Hodor approached, steps crunch soft. Moonlight traced silver along prosthetic plates. Bran spoke without turning. "Do you remember the stable at the inn outside Wintertown?" Hodor's brow furrowed. He knelt beside Bran, limbs folding with care not to disturb fresh stitches. After a long moment he nodded, one decisive bob of head. "When I entered your mind," Bran said, voice low, "I thought it mercy. Yet each time I've wondered if what I took had been more than you could grant. Tonight I saw in dreams a door still open." He raised hand to Hodor's flesh wrist. "If you wish, I can close it forever." Hodor drew a breath that steamed in moonlight. He glanced at the arm, flexed fingers until a faint hum answered. Then he looked to Bran. Eyes clear, unclouded by war or winter. "Hodor," he said softly, and Bran felt the word's intent. "You opened it so we could live. Let it remain, for now every step is my own." He pressed Bran's hand back against fur-lined cloak. The boy Lord of Winterfell exhaled, relief mingling with something older than either of them. In canopy above, a raven cawed once and fell silent. With dawn came ravens from the south. Qyburn's ciphered scrolls, intercepted by Maester Walken, spoke of bi-loyal sellswords gathering at King's Landing, of scorpions lining parapets like iron thorns, of golden banners rippling above Red Keep. Cersei had crowned herself anew upon rumored fall of the dead, Queen of Dawn. She called the title perverse mockery of prophecy. Jon Snow rode north from White Harbor with Tormund, the Free Folk rear guard, and a column of 10 ships worth of grain pledged by Lady Manderly. Ghost loped at his stirrup. His first night in Winterfell's yard, he knelt by piles of newly forged weapons. Valyrian alloyed spearheads cooled in black sand. Gendry nodded, approving fit of sockets. Hodor stood behind, hammering test strikes on anvil to check balance. When Jon saw the prosthesis, he hesitated, wonder flickering. He touched a finger to one steel claw tip. Valyrian steel should be passed through bloodlines, not melted. Gendry shrugged. Bloodlines won't mean much if Lannister scorpions bring dragons down. Hodor lifted the heavy spear Jon inspected. He twirled it in a lazy arc, metal humming. Jon's brow rose. "Seems bloodline chose its bearer," he said quietly. Council convened under cracked lob arches of the solar. Bran presided, cloaked in weirwood winter white. Sansa, copper braids pinned in circlet of rowan leaves. Tyrion arrived from the south with Davos, having ridden hard cheeks wind-cracked. Brienne, Gendry, Arya, Pod, Samwell Tarly and Hodor stood attendant. Tyrion unfurled a stained map. Euron's iron fleet anchors off Blackwater Bay. Cersei rations food to loyal districts. Starving Flea Bottom while feeding the Red Keep. She's courting sellswords with commoner's coin. Nesto. Sam tapped parchment. Dragonglass reserves are low. Even Valyrian weapons chip on mundane steel. We'll need allies sooner than supplies. Bran's eyes clouded, pupils thinning. Allies will come, if the realm believes Dawn resides here, not on parchment crowns. He turned to Hodor. "Would you journey to the Riverlands? Sir Edmure rallies bannermen. Your story may carry weight among those who doubt the North remembers more than its own." Nen Tran. Hodor blinked. Travel. Distance. Roads haunted by lingering pockets of dead, by bandits grown bold. But memory of Dor and of choosing life thrummed inside him. He nodded. Sansa laid a hand over Bran's. "He won't go alone. Podrick knows the Trident's fords and Arya." She met her sister's gray gaze. "Few riders cross a kingdom unseen as you." Arya's half-smile was all reply needed. They departed 3 dawns later. Hodor astride a colossal destrier named Greymere, Arya on pale mare whispers. Podrick steering a supply cart. Gendry pressed a bundle of spare cables and oil stones into Hodor's satchel. Brienne tightened buckles on his new boiled leather cuirass, cut to accommodate steel limb. At gate Hodor paused, twisting in saddle, to face Bran and Sansa, upon rampart. He raised the Valyrian hand in slow salute. Snowflakes caught on plates, melting instantly. Bran's voice carried, soft yet certain. The threads weave true when hearts are steady. It was farewell and benediction and promise. They rode south under a sky the color of old pewter. Behind them, Winterfell's ramparts receded like the fading notes of a hearth song. Ahead stretched leagues of wind-carved drifts, bare willows, derelict crofts. Ravens paced overhead, scouting silent. Midway through the King's Road's shattered length, they crossed a hamlet scorched down to mud-brick chimneys. A sigil, a flayed man, had been daubed in ash upon a barn door. Arya dismounted, wiping soot. Her glance at Hodor held question-sharpened blade. He answered by hauling barn doors off hinges, revealing trembling villagers inside. 2 women, a wounded shepherd, 3 children clutching spoons like daggers. They shrank from giant silhouette until Arya slid forward, hood back, eyes bright as steel at dusk. "We ride for Riverrun," she said. "There's bread and safety behind Lord Tully's walls." The shepherd blinked at her, then at Hodor's arm. "Heard tell of a shadow with ice-blue eyes. Thought you were it." Hodor knelt, offering steel palm. A small girl, dirt-smeared cheeks, tangled hair, stepped close, pressing a wooden doll into the metal. When no harm followed, tension drained from huddled survivors like thawing frost. Podrick unloaded sacks of oats and a water skin. They left the villagers with directions to Moat Cailin, where wildlings now farmed fallow fields, and rode on. Miles later, Arya remarked, "You speak more with silence than most with sermons." Hodor looked puzzled. "Hodor?" "Exactly." She grinned, heels tapping whispers to canter ahead. Evening brought them to a clearing, rimmed by frost-tipped birches. Cookfire crackled, Podrick stirred broth. Wolves howled far off. Hodor sat polishing joints, starlight glittering on plates. Arya practiced forms beyond fire glow, feet whispering over dried leaves. At length she sheathed needle, walked to Hodor's side. "When I was little," she began, eyes on flames, "I thought swords were answers. Now I know they're only questions. Sharp ones that cut until someone listens." Nagderalmer were. She drew cat's paw dagger, turned the dragon-glass blade beneath starlight. "This cut the Night King, but it's quiet as any rock until a hand guides it. Your arm, same." She set dagger in his steel palm. "Any tool can free or break." She closed his fingers over it. "You choose." Hodor studied blade's dark mirror surface, seeing flickers of fire and stars and his own reflection. No longer the simple stable boy, nor the mute vessel of ward dreams, but a man following horizon lines. He returned dagger to her gently. "Hodor." Arya understood. At Riverrun's moss-clad walls, horn sentries sounded. Edmure Tully rode forth. Gray streaks in beard, eyes chiseled by years in Lannister dungeons. He embraced Pod, clasped Arya's wrist, then turned to Hodor, head craning upward. "7 hells. You could wrestle Blackfish's statue." Riverlords gathered in the yard as news spread. The giant who slew whites, the wolf of steel. Campfires erupted in storytelling. Minstrels wove fresh verses before a first ale cask emptied. Hodor found himself surrounded by archers wanting to touch metal plates, children plaiting reeds around his biceps. He endured with shy patience until moon-crested battlements and quiet reclaimed ramparts. Inside High Hall, Edmure convened council. Lords Blackwood, Mallister, Darry, and an envoy from Harrenhal argued provisions, routes, numbers, OB. Arya spoke crisp summaries of North's strength. Pod produced Bran's seal promising ships from White Harbor. When talk circled hopelessly, Hodor rose. He stood amidst debate, steel hand resting on table. Conversation died, candles sputtering. He said nothing, just looked from face to face, calm, enormous. In silence, Each lord recalled corpses that had risen and the dawn that followed, because giants stood while men doubted. Agreement came smoother thereafter. Weeks passed. Spring's first thaw bled into river wash as banners rallied. Trout leaping scarlet, green willow on white, ravens upon silver. Edmure marched 10,000 foot, 800 mounted. Arya and Hodor rode vanguard scouts, pod commanding supply wains. They crossed swift currents swollen with meltwater, forded by pontoons built under Gendry's design. Wherever stragglers doubted, stories of Hodor's stand at Winterfell rekindled resolve. Yet rumors drifted north on cold breezes. Euron Greyjoy's fleet had taken Storm's End. Scorpions bristled along walls. Cersei's alchemists refined wildfire under guild halls. Qyburn loosed secret beasts in Flea Bottom to terrify hungry crowds into obedience. For every house that joined the Riverlands host, another cowered behind stone, waiting to wager on Victor's banner. Still they marched. Outside Maidenpool, they encountered Lannister outriders, harrying refugees along the road. Trumpets wailed. Hodor spurred Greymere into charge. The destrier thundered down slope, hooves splitting mud. Cavalry parted like reeds before a flood. Hodor's mace, refitted with spiked Morning Star head for horseback, swung in brutal arcs. Armor crumpled, spears splintered. He plucked a banner-bearer from saddle, hurled him into levy ranks, scattering them. Pod's column sealed flanks. Archers picked crimson lions from hillside trees. When dust settled, surviving refugees, dockhands, septas, gutter boys, knelt, whispering thanks. They had lost kin to wildfire explosion that leveled an entire lane near the dragon pit. Hodor dismounted, helping a lame boy onto cart. The boy stared at metallic fingers. Cold, he murmured. Hodor puffed warm breath across the steel until frost melted. The boy smiled. Nights grew shorter, air tasting faint of budding apple. They camped in ruins of a watchtower felled during Robert's Rebellion. Arya climbed tumbled stones to view southward plains glimmering moonlit. She found Hodor beneath skeletal rafters of the tower's corpse, gaze fixed on stars. She sat, knees drawn. "You look for something." "Hodor." He pointed with living hand toward a cluster of bright lights. The Sword of the Morning, some named it, but Bran had taught him its older title, the Door's Hinge. Arya traced awareness along constellations. "Doors can open both ways," she murmured after a time. "But they can be held too." Hodor nodded, expression distant. "We'll hold this one," she promised. Approach to Crackclaw Point proved treacherous. Marsh mist curled above viscous bogs. Half-sunken causeways vanished beneath tides. Scouts vanished, presumably captured by Lannister-paid sellswords. Arya slipped ahead alone, returning by dawn with crimson-stained cloak and a rough sketch of enemy emplacements. Edmure arranged flanking columns. Before sunrise fog lifted, Riverlords seized a dozen shore batteries. Scorpion arms burned. Crackclaw Point's free folk, woodsmen who had long despised crown taxes, joined the march, swelling ranks beyond counting. Yet each victory underlined one truth. King's Landing awaited with fangs bared and Cersei's cunning coiled beneath. On the ridge overlooking the Blackwater rushed the host-made camp. Smoke from city chimneys painted dusk in dirty gray spirals. The Red Keep's towers glinted like blood-tipped spears. Bells rang, mournful. Somewhere within those walls, Qyburn withheld monstrous surprises. Euron's ships patrolled glimmering waters, black sails amid flotsam of older wars. Edmure's council ring assembled within pavilion. Arya produced passages she'd scouted through forgotten catacombs. Pod relayed Bran's Raven dispatch promising Jon's arrival by sea with Davos and northern troops. Ziga ladders were built from felled cedars, mantlets covered in soaked hides, trenches dug. Yet each plan ended at same question. Dragons. No dragonfire now warmed the night. Daenerys' last dragon remained north in shattered Weirwood glade, nursing seared wing. Cersei still feared the sky, but scorpions littered rooftops waiting potential monster that would never come. In turn, her walls stood near impregnable. Silence gathered heavy. Then Hodor stepped forward. He unbuckled the mace from saddle loop, set it on map table with muted thunk. Using thumb on pen pod provided, he sketched a rough half-circle. Sewer outlets entering the river, passages long ignored since Maker's expansions. Pod's eyes widened. The prosthesis. Greased plates seal, water can't seize gears. He could wade the current, force an opening from inside. Arya tapped dagger on drawing. I can slip with him. Together we open postern for strike force while Fleabottom rises in distraction. She turned to Hodor. If you'll go. He met her stare, calm as deep wells. Hodor. Resolve. 2 nights before new moon, they slipped from camp, disguised as fishermen. Greymere left behind. Hodor trod barefoot along mudflats. Each step soundless as his companion, cat padded across tidepool stones. They reached outflow grate beneath crenellated spur of King's Gate, iron bars thick as forearms, corroded by decades of brackish water. Arya knelt, raking dragonglass along rust. Hodor set steel claws into joints. With quiet pressure, metal groaned, then gave, snapping free. They slipped inside, water waist-deep for Arya, thigh for Hodor. Sewers stank of rot and wildfire seepage, walls luminescent with weird green lichen. Rats fled. They advanced through tunnels Bran had revealed in Green Dreams. Left at a junction marked by Griffin, etched in stone. Right where trickle tasted of salt, not silt. At length they surfaced beneath cracked cistern inside the city, emerging through crate shadow in deserted storeroom. Distant, drunken laughter wafted. Cell's words. Bored night watch shift. Arya vanished into corridor gloom. Hodor waited, breath measured, prosthesis dripping rivulets onto rushes. Minutes lengthened. Footsteps echoed. 2 guards stumbled in, cursing latrine duty. One lifted torch, squinting, eyes widened at looming silhouette. He fumbled for horn. Hodor moved. Steel fingers closed over torch haft, crushing it. Wooden shaft splintered. Flames snuffed. Darkness cloaked the struggle. Grunt, thud, hush. When Arya returned, she found 2 bound men gagged with tunic scraps. Hodor leaning casual against wall. She raised eyebrow. He merely shrugged. Hodor. They continued. Fleabottom ignited at first bell. River-run spies had smuggled bread loaves through narrow alleys for days. Hunger swelled into riot. When Lannister patrols descended, torches met oil-soaked refuse. Flames spiraled skyward, a beacon visible miles beyond walls. Atop ramparts, Cell's words scrambled to man scorpions, but no dragon came. Only shouted curses and flights of arrows as Riverlord skirmishers pressed from North Gate. Amid chaos, Arya and Hodor breached Inner Ward Gatehouse. She scaled ladderwork, slicing counterweight ropes. Portcullis groaned, upward. Podrick and crack unit of Northmen flooded through, overwhelming defenders before alarm spread. They secured gate, swung it wide. By dawn, Edmure's full army poured into King's Landing's poorer quarter, meeting only pockets of sellsword resistance. Yet the Red Keep endured, perched upon Egan's Hill, wildfire mines underfoot. Queen Cersei watched from balustrade, goblet blood-red in fist, face lit by magnesium flare of burning shanties. She turned to Qyburn. So the wolf sends his pet giant. How quaint. Beneath marble floors, gears clicked. The mountain, revived, donned black armor etched with studded thorns. Other things stirred. Cages of pale lions bred with shadow cats. A towering siege scorpion modified to swivel within throne room itself. Cersei smiled, cold as ancient coin. Outside Sarah Gate, Jon Snow's ships unfurled sails at dawn azure. Davos guided them through shallows left unmined, trusting charts smuggled by smugglers' own memory. Northern warriors disembarked onto quays, meeting Edmure's banners in jubilant clash of gauntlets. Jon clasped Hodor's shoulder where giant waited at docks. Steel fingers tapped hull planks with metallic patience. Ghost bark howl rose above cheer. The last battle for Iron Throne gathered like thunderclouds. That night War Council formed within sacked counting house off Street of Seeds. Jon, Edmure, Arya, Davos, Tyrion, arrived via hidden route from inside city. Brienne, Gendry, Hodor, Podrick, Tarta. Maps weighed by melted silver candlesticks showed concentric courts of Red Keep, each bastion laced with wildfire caches. Qyburn's armor-gilded mountain roamed path near Great Sep's ruins. Head-on assault costs thousands, Davos warned. Tyrion stroked beard. Sister's pride sits central. Throne room and balcony for spectacles. Remove that pride, the rest unravels. Nanny rots. Jon's gray eyes narrowed. I'll challenge Cersei to parley sunrise. While she stalls, we slip elite force through traitors' walk behind Dragon Pit. Ascend bastard stair beneath tower shadows. Brienne nodded. Guard captain still loyal to oath may grant us passage. All looked to Hodor. Silence answered until steel palm lifted. Tapping map at point where bastion's foundation overlapped old sept catacombs. Stone weakened by wildfire long ago. Hodor. The meaning. Break walls from within. Gendry inspected drawings. If we pack pig fat casks, Tyrion interrupted. Wildfire lines those tunnels. Arya twitched cat's paw's pommel. Then we light her on spite, after we're clear. Eyes met around flickering lamplight. Agreement forged. Dawn again, third since host camped beyond walls. Market square littered with broken carts and blackened tent frames. Cersei descended red marble stairs flanked by mountain and Qyburn Darwayri. She halted before cracked lion's sigil at courtyard center, waiting. Across emptiness Jon Snow approached, cloak whipping. Hodor, enormous, stood behind among chosen six. Arya, Brienne, Gendry, Podrick, and Davos. Parley ensued. A dance of words. Threats, veiled bargains. Cersei demanded unconditional surrender. Jon offered exile to free cities. Insults sharpened. While Queen monologued, Arya's attention flicked to window slits above. Subtle nod passed to Pod. He eased away behind column where tunnel entrance yawed. At signal from courtyard, Edmure's artillery beyond walls launched flaming pots into barracks quarter. Explosions rocked east parapet. Smoke billowed, drowning vantage watchers. Within confusion, Arya vanished. Hodor and Gendry seized opportunity, slipping into archway. Cersei smirked at Jon's feigned alarm. Run along, bastard, she purred. I'll send your heads north in time for winter. But Jon only stepped back, a shadow of sadness crossing features. Winter's gone, he said, voice low. But dawn remembers. He turned and strode away into smoke. Inside catacombs, darkness clung like cobwebs. Arya led, torch guttering green where wildfire residue coated walls. Gendry and Pod lugged barrels of pig fat. Davos carried fuses soaked in oil. Hodor brought only mace and steel certainty. They reached breach where masonry sagged from Maegor's ancient furnace fires. Arya pressed ear to stone, hearing armored footfalls beyond. Mountains patrol. They placed barrels, wicks trailing like serpents. When all was ready, Davos nodded. Arya sparked flint, flame-licked fuse tips. They raced back through tunnels. Footsteps above quickened. Mountain sensed vibrations, but too late. Blast thundered, air sucking inward then roaring outward with emerald fireball. Courtyard cobbles heaved. Bastard's stair collapsed. In throne room, Cersei staggered as quake rattled walls. Through rolling dust Hodor emerged from debris into antechamber. At far end a mountain stood, crimson plume charred black, sword the size of scythe. Behind him, door to throne room and Cersei's last refuge. Arya darted left, flickering shadow. Gendry moved right. Mountain stomped forward, each step cracked flagstones. Hodor met him mid-hall, prosthetic raised. Sword descended, carving fissure in air. Wolf head mace parried, sparks showering. Mountain strength met giants, steel screeching. Back and forth, they traded blows too fast for eyes. Each strike echoing like siege rams on gates. Mountain feinted low. Hodor swept block, claws catching blade, holding. Sparks flew as gears locked. Mountain leaned weight, trying to press metal jaws to floor. Hodor's knees dipped, but he braced. Arya slipped beneath Colossus, slicing hamstring gap in armor. Black blood oozed. Mountain roared, foot lashing, sending her skidding. Rage powered next swing. He wrenched sword free, arching overhead. Hodor shifted inside arc, drove mace upward into breastplate. Metal crumpled inward. Undead ribs cracked. But Mountain's gauntlet punched, striking Hodor's wounded side. Pain flared. He staggered. Podrick's arrow whistled from doorway, lodging in eye slit. Gendry hurled smithy hammer, colliding with helm, denting strata. Mountain pivoted, rage blind. Arya leapt, driving catspaw dagger deep into crease of throat armor. Frost of Undeath hissed, wrought steam clouded air. Yet the giant knight still swung, backhanding Gendry into pillar. Hodor straightened, breath ragged. He remembered door holding, remembered Bran's warmth, remembered stable hay sweet after rain. He gripped mace two-handed, steel and flesh, swung a final arc that began in Winterfell's Godswood and ended here. The impact shattered helm, caved skull, drove Mountain to knees. Arya yanked dagger free, plunged again into exposed spine. The mountain toppled. A mountain no more. They pushed onward. In throne room wildfire torches guttered. Cersei stood before Iron Throne. Crossbow aimed though hands trembled. Qyburn cowered. She saw steel-armed giant loom through smoke, Arya at his flank, others blood-spattered. Desperation twisted her voice. "Monster," she spat at Hodor. "Beast of snow and shadow." Arya answered, stepping forward. "No beast, shield." Cersei's bolt loosed. Hodor raised prosthesis. Bolt snapped against Valyrian plate, ricocheted. Panic seized Queen. She scrambled onto throne dais. Hodor ascended, each footfall ringing. "Stay back," she shrieked. He paused one step below. With slow grace he extended steel hand to her. Not threat. Offer. Cersei stared, eyes rimmed crimson. Pride warred with fear. She backed against twisted swords, gown snagging jagged points. Above, ceiling cracked, blast tremors. Dust rained. Her lip curled. She spat again, refusing. Arya's voice cut air, soft, lethal. "Choose." Memory of Catspaw's bite gleamed. Cersei's eyes darted. Torchlight twisted metal, looming wolf giant. Door behind them crumbling. She chose pride. Another crossbow bolt whipped. Arya deflected. Hodor advanced. Cersei stumbled, foot catching on bladed hilt, falling against iron fangs. Sword points lanced through silk into flesh. Breath hitched. Eyes widened in disbelief. She sagged, crown clattering. Hodor watched. Sorrow fleeting across features. He grasped twisted hilts, bending them apart, lifting Queen's body free to lay upon cool marble. He closed her eyes with living hand. Wildfire flare flickered from cracks. Gendry shouted, caches primed by quake igniting. They had minutes. Arya retrieved crown, weighed its cold heft, then tossed it to corner where it spun and settled. They fled, pod guiding hidden stair to hillside terrace. From distance, they watched Red Keep's upper levels bloom green inferno. Spires collapsing. Bells tolled once, then burst into soundless flame. At city gates, dawn rose rose gold, casting long shadows of ash drifting like snow. Survivors flooded streets singing half-remembered hymns. Edmure and Jon met upon rampart breached by riot, clasping wrists. Tyrion wept quiet tears at sight of collapsed throne silhouette. Hodor strode through square where gangs once fought over rats. Children hailed him wolf-arm. Mothers pressed flowers into his belt. He paused at shattered fountain, staring into pool where soot swirled. Arya joined, both silent. After a while Arya asked, "Doors closed?" Hodor considered, then shook head gently. "Hodor." She understood. Doors never close entirely. They turn on hinges called choice. Orange light warmed spires anew, not wildfire but sunrise. Bells without ropes lay silent, yet hope pealed in every breath, drawn free of tyranny. Jon's voice carried from steps of ruined sept. The realm will choose its guardians. Eyes turned to him, then to Hodor, standing resolute. In silence, thick with dawn's promise. Giant and girl and snowborn king stared across broken city, seeing beyond walls to fields waiting for seeds, to rivers clearing of ice, to roads leading home. And Hodor, feeling weight of Valyrian steel upon shoulder tempered with children's flowers, spoke once, word cradle and candle, ending and beginning. Hodor,